Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Can you imagine losing 300 pounds and then gaining it back, and then losing those 300 pounds again? Our guest today, our friend Mike Gorman, also known as Gormy, has now lost more than 300 pounds twice. From his peak weight of 540 pounds, Gormy is now more than 300 pounds lighter, and he's working on mastering maintenance. He now hosts the Fat Guy Forum podcast and works as a nutrition coach, inspiring other folks to overcome the challenges of obesity and especially food addiction. More rampant than ever these days. Gormy is incredibly inspiring and insightful. I think you'll dig this interview. This is one of the people who, had followed and been in touch over the years with the podcast and various social media and stuff. And it's just so great to get in touch with you folks, like people in the community, not necessarily just kind of, world-class experts are awesome to talk to as our, like doctors, best-selling authors and celebrities and that sort of thing. But hearing from real people who have gone through this from a different perspective. That's kind of what Gormy, through his content, specializes in. It's an incredibly valuable resource for real world people out there. Not everything is perfect. A lot of us don't have a history of being athletic or being even, at a healthy weight going back to high school. A lot of us haven't developed the skills or, kind of gone through the education that it sometimes takes to get control of your body composition and certainly your health. So hearing from Gormy is so valuable, and I really appreciate you, Gormy, for reaching out, as well as all of you folks out there for reaching out. So before we get to the show, here's the note that came in from our friend Dallas. He says, "My box of goodies came in today. Really appreciate it. Also, I wanted to show off my Abel James Designer Babies Still Get Scabies book. My favorite poems are The Zucker Burglar and Vegan Junk Food. Pure gold." Love your podcast too, my man. I want to take a few minutes and tell you my story and what the wild diet and the knowledge contained within it have done for me and my family. Here we go. Grew up with absolutely no food knowledge or limits or rules. If it looked good, eat it. If it tasted good, eat more of it. I struggled with weight and confidence issues my entire life, especially during my formative teen years, and this really shaped the paths I went down and ultimately didn't go down in basically all areas of my life. Things are so much clearer looking back, aren't they? Hindsight's 20/20 for sure. In my adult life, I finally got sick and tired of looking and feeling sick and tired. In 2017, my wife Melanie discovered Grit Fitness, and we both started attending the high cardio, high intensity kettlebell style of workouts, and we both knew right away this was for us. Let me tell you what happened at Grit Fitness. They launched their Summer Wild Diet Challenge, and everything changed. As it went, I was coerced to participate in Grit's seasonal wild diet launch, and it changed my life without a doubt. The information and concepts contained in the wild diet gave me boundaries to operate in food-wise, so to speak. It first of all taught my wife and I about the deception and profiteering in the American food industry, along with the metabolic importance of getting well-sourced food free from crap. You obviously know what's in your book, and it was so clarifying. My performance at the gym, overall well-being, both physically and mentally, skyrocketed. Those gains at the gym got pretty dramatic, and most importantly, our kids are enjoying learning more and more about food as they get older, an opportunity Melanie and I didn't have until our 30s. So in closing, ever since about mid-2017, we have practiced to the best of our abilities a clean, healthy lifestyle and strive to keep going. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Dallas, this is so incredible. And your pictures are too. I mean, wow. But anyone who hasn't heard the episode that I did a while back, years now, with Grit Fitness, just go to fatburningman.com, type in Grit Fitness, pull that episode up, because these are the people we're talking about. They have done it right over the years. They've been friends as well. And it's just so cool to all be connected. So thank you so much for sharing this, Dallas. I'm really glad that you like Designer Babies and you pulled out your favorite poems. I'm very entertained by which ones are your favorites. So don't be shy in sharing that with me. You can DM me on social media. I'm on most, if not all of them. Not all of them. I'm on most of them. But I tend to be very responsive. So if you dig my book, The Wild Diet, Designer Babies, if you'd like to get in touch, please don't hesitate to reach out. And you can always shoot me an email at abel@fatburningman.com. And if you'd like to help support this show and keep these books, all these projects, podcasts, and more coming your way, then you can drop a few bucks into the tip jar over at fatburningman.com. We got that set all up. It's fatburningman.com/tip jar. You can also support us over on Patreon from any country. I'm coaching people all over the world. We have group coaching set up with Discord servers, all sorts of fun stuff. So make sure to look up Patreon/Abel James. That's ABEL James. You can also just look up Abel James on Patreon. And then finally, if you're interested in the nutraceuticals and supplements that my wife and family and I have been taking for many years, that we trust, that we recommend, then check out Wild Superfoods. My family, we started up this company so that we could continue to bring independent content to you over the years and wouldn't have to take on corporate overlords or investors or anything else like that to keep us going. And we're kind of squeaking by, but we're making it work. We're getting off the ground with Wild Superfoods. And the feedback from you folks has been so positive. So right now we're only in the US, but if you're interested in a shelf-stable super greens powder, basically a smoothie or a green juice that you can have anywhere you go, check out Future Greens at Wild Superfoods. When it's late in the day and I feel my energy drooping, I oftentimes break my fast with Future Greens just in water. And it's really easy to mix up, quite delicious to have on its own. You can find all that over at wildsuperfoods.com. You can use the promo code for listeners, WILD15. That's WILD with the number 15 as the promo code. It'll get you 15% off over at Wild Superfoods. And we have big discounts going on. We have a lot of new announcements coming out soon. You can stock up and save with subscription options, and then we include some of our coaching for free within that. So make sure you check out wildsuperfoods.com. And then, of course, you can get the show right up. You can get more than 350 episodes of this show for free, as always, at fatburningman.com. Don't forget to check that out. All right, on to the show with our friend Gormy. We're chatting about lessons learned from shedding 300 pounds twice, mastering weight loss maintenance with mindfulness, how to eat low carb at a hospital, easier said than done, that's for sure, how to prevent serious illness by prioritizing health, and tons more. Let's go hang out with Gormy. Welcome back, folks. Today we're here with our friend Mike Gorman, aka Gormy, host of the Fat Guy Forum podcast, which is terrific, by the way. And he's a man who's dropped an astonishing 300 pounds twice. From his peak weight of 540 pounds, Gormy is now more than 300 pounds lighter and works as now a nutrition coach, inspiring other folks to overcome the challenges of obesity and food addiction. Welcome to the show, Gormy.
Thanks, Abel. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been so fun to connect with you and just catch up on your work. Your story is really unique. There aren't a lot of people out there, until your podcast anyway, who are just so transparent, openly sharing the ugly side of a lot of these different dietary trends and fads that come through, and experiencing, the dramatic results of going up and down, especially multiple times. So let's just, for the people who aren't familiar with your channels, let's catch them up a little bit.
Sure. So like you said, I grew up, my entire life I was overweight, struggled with weight issues up and down and all over the place. And if you can name a diet, I probably tried it. I like to highlight, to give a picture into my age. I was big at one point into Richard Simmons' Deal-A-Meal, which not a lot of younger people will know or remember, that there were, decks of colored cards that you would deal out for yourself, depending on how much food you were getting for the day. I did Weight Watchers in 3 or 4 different incarnations of it. And my heaviest weight ever, like you mentioned, was I get up to 540 pounds. I was in the 500s for several years, lived that life for quite a while. And when I decided it was time to make a change, it was really kind of motivated by realizing not a lot of people were going to want to hire someone who was in the condition that I was in, and I needed work, and it was in that place, and didn't really have a great mindset, diving into it, but knew I needed to do something. And that was when I discovered paleo, and paleo was what was that first program for me, going initially just kind of basic paleo. And that was when the Whole30 was starting to come up. This was like 2010. We're looking at like 10 years ago.
Yeah, I was there.
You were there, you were starting to, you were exploding onto the scene yourself then. And, so I dropped weight, I went from 540, I got down to 210, did that in about 2 years. And, that was 2013 that I got down there. And then I very rapidly put the weight back on, very rapidly. In a span of about 6 months, put most of the weight back on.
Right. And just share what that number is, because a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was May 1st to beginning of October of 2013. I went from 210 pounds to 480 pounds. So it's about 270 pounds in a little over 5 months.
Yeah.
And really, I attribute that to the fact that it wasn't necessarily that the way of eating wasn't working for me. I think honestly, at the end of the day, almost any diet that you follow is going to work. As long as you can follow it and live it, it's going to work.
Yeah.
But I did no work on the mindset side of things. I did no work on like why was I doing this? What was actually, what was changing? What was changing about my life? And also I think one of those things, like when you make a massive weight loss transformation, you don't become a different person, but the way you interact with the world changes. And if you don't get ready for that, it can be a scary thing.
Sure.
And it's not comfortable. And it's one of those things where it's easy to retreat into old behaviors. And I think that's what really happened, food addiction, all of those pieces that I did not really have a handle on. I like to say that when I went through that weight loss transformation, that I white knuckled my way through it. I was eating healthy food. I was eating plenty of healthy food. But I hadn't really kind of unlocked the thing that was going to help me actually get control of appetite and satiation and understand what physical hunger and mind hunger felt like and all of those things, and gave no thought to that because in my mind, weight loss was always you do the work and you achieve the result. You change the plate, you get the information that you need. So I regained the weight and basically at that point just decided, well, this must be how I'm meant to be, fell into that place of this is my life. This is what it's going to be like. Just live your life and live your life for as long as you can. And it's not going to be that long and that's fine, and almost in some ways I just come to that place of being at peace with that idea that, okay, I tried to make change. It didn't work. I'm not going to be able to fix this. So why even try? Why stress myself out? Just live life, enjoy life. And, I was so lost kind of in the food addiction side of things that to me, that was okay as long as the food was there. So I kind of lived that life for a few years and then ran into some situations with my family that just kind of gave me some thoughts where I realized that I was just letting my life happen. I wasn't really being an active participant. I was letting these other behaviors rule everything. And I decided I needed to do something again. What I like to say is like, I finally realized that I wanted to live and that I was going to fight to live. And I had to find the right things to do that. And in that sphere, to talk about kind of like how I figured out what to do, I had gone from that place of, paleo taught me a lot of things. It taught me about nutrient quality and ingredients and sourcing and, animal care and all of those great things, that were really fantastic. And, at one point, not to butter you up, at one point in 2015, I remember getting the Wild Diet book and getting really excited to give that a go and
That's awesome.
fell off miserably, of course.
It's all good.
I think I still have it though. I do have it. There's still a lot that I looked at for it, but I realized, so like for me, yes, ingredient quality and the idea of eating great whole food was really going to be important. But there was still missing pieces there. There were some things that were not, coming together. And that was really around the time that like the K word started to become big,
yeah.
In the spheres, keto, people were talking about it. This was back in 2016, 2017. There wasn't a lot as much as there is right now. You couldn't walk into a convenience store and see Slim Fast Keto peanut butter cups sitting at a checkout like you can today. So I found a couple books that really kind of like gave me one of the things that stood out to me was this idea that people talked about being satiated and the idea that eating increased fat was going to give you some of that. And, just reading anecdotal stories of people feeling freedom. And I decided I was going to give it a try. It was really kind of like, okay, this is so in line with what I was doing before, So I like to say that I kind of, to start, was kind of more like a paleo keto. Like I feel like the two things are separate in some ways, in terms of like, because you can do keto, you can do dirty keto, you can eat crappy box food, 100% of the time and still be quote unquote keto. Or you can look at, eating whole food ingredients. And so like that was the path that I took. And that was February of 2017. I was 470 pounds. And honestly, I think the reason I didn't get back up to where my weight was before, the highest, was because I had undiagnosed blood sugar and pre-diabetes or full-blown diabetes. Doctors that I've worked with now, based on the lasting effects on my body, because I avoided doctors for decades, the lasting effects on my body now, the doctors say you most likely were undiagnosed diabetic and untreated. And that's why, when you hit a certain point of kind of unregulated, out of control blood sugar, your body's not even holding on to weight anymore. It's like that, where they talk about sometimes they can identify a diabetic because they had a massive weight loss very rapidly. So I made some changes. I went keto. Gormy Goes Keto is my Instagram. That's kind of where that came from. And over the next 2.5 years, basically went from 470 pounds down to around 210 pounds again, into that range. And I've settled in that kind of like 210, 230 range, kind of where my body's comfortable. I'm probably up about 10 pounds now more than I would like to be, thanks to our good friend going on in the world, quarantine effects and those sort of things. But, I had to, I made some changes this time, and I know I'm kind of rambling a little bit, so I apologize for that. But the thing I did this time that was different was I didn't just pick a way of eating. I decided that no matter what I did, I was going to be mindful from day one. I was going to think about how was I feeling as I was eating, how the food was affecting me, how was it affecting my life, what were the choices I was making, why was I making those choices, and really get into that and not shy away from it anymore. Because I think it's easy to hide from a lot of those issues. Like, it's easy to just say, I have to fill these boxes in. I have to check off this list of foods I'm going to eat today, and I can move on with my day. And instead, being aware of the emotional side of things. Like, I used to always say I was never an emotional eater. And now what I say is that I was very much an emotional eater. It's just that I ate constantly. So I was numbing myself constantly. So now I feel very strong emotions, because I don't use those same coping mechanisms. But being conscious of that has really been like the biggest kind of game changer for me. So I've come to this place now of, working on this whole new world of weight maintenance. And what does that mean? Because that was something I was never that great at. And my journey evolved. I started out working on my own. I started out in that place of just counting carbs. I wasn't really even counting fat and protein because I had that kind of paleo plate template in my mind of I knew kind of like what to eat for meats and what to eat for healthy fats. And eventually when that slowed down, and I actually started to realize that some of my ingrained behaviors, like my food addiction, I was starting to overeat on keto foods and see some weight come back. I realized I needed some support. I needed to maybe do a little tighter tracking of what I was doing, which was a little intimidating. The math can get a little intimidating. Right. So I started working with a coach, and that was kind of an incredible experience because one of the things that we did was we shifted. So we're tracking my macros very tightly. And I started eating actually a very higher fat ratio tracked ketogenic diet, was up in like the 75% range. And for me, it was almost like that was a switch that flipped. And I found whereas before I saw partial relief from cravings, like that was complete relief from cravings for me, like in terms of the physical side. So I could start to identify like when I had a mental craving and when it really was something driven by emotion and what was going on that day and what were the stressors. And, working with someone, I was able to start seeing that there's other factors that come into play on this kind of journey, sleep and stress and physical activity and like all these different things that we don't normally think about because we think it really is just about, at the end of the day, you'll see it in social media, weight loss is calories in, calories out. Yeah. And I think that's a part of it. I think it's a huge part of it. Like, I don't think there's anything magic to keto, but I do think that there's other factors that come into play and things to think about. And that was really the eye-opening piece for me, was realizing that there's just so much more to it. And when you're aware of all of that is when the journey, I don't want to say it gets easier, but it gets simpler to figure out some of the different challenges you're facing. So we come around to now, the coach that I worked with now actually is my boss. I work with him as a coach, working with individuals as well, who are looking at kind of like a holistic ketogenic approach to their nutrition. And we work on mindset and goal setting and all the things that really helped me. I feel like in a lot of ways, like I took notes along the way this time, and that's not something I did before. So it's gotten easier for me to be able to kind of build this sustainable life. People love to say keto is not sustainable. There's no way you can do it forever. And I'm like, well, yes, it's only been 4 years, 3.5 years. But I feel like I'm in that place now where I can actually start to make choices, based on the goals that I have for myself and where I want my health to go. And it's not, as robotic as it was before. It now just has become more, this is my life and this is what my life is going to be.
Yeah, and once you have those grooves in your habits, you kind of have that momentum, and it's harder to get off course. But one of the things I heard you talk about was you never really had, you're on or off, right? And I could definitely relate to that. And so, like, the idea of maintenance, when do you decide that you're in maintenance? What does that mean? Are you keto if you like eat a cookie that has sugar in it, right? Like, that's another thing where we all have to be really careful around identity and kind of like what all of this means. If you're vegan and you have a little mayonnaise with egg in it, or like if you're keto or if you're carnivore and you drink coffee. And so we need to be hopefully something you could speak to. And it sounds like you really go through this with a lot of the people you interview. It's just like how we need to give ourselves a break and be conscious of the fact that, like, we are kind of out of control and we need to manage that, right?
Oh yeah, and I think you're right. Like, and I think that some points in our journeys, there's a place to identify with the way you're eating.
Totally.
Like, I think you draw a strength from that. Like, this is what I'm doing. This is, it helps you with those control issues. It gives you some structure. But I think when it starts to become dogma and it starts to become, this is the only thing, this is your defining characteristic for your life, is when it starts to become something that's more of a hindrance than a help. And one of the things you talked about, like, are you keto if you eat a cookie? Like, I get questions all the time of people saying, when can I have a cheat meal? When can I have a cheat meal? Do you have cheat meals? What do your cheats look like? And they use this language of cheats. And I'm like, I look at life and food as a choice. Everything is a choice. And I make the best choices for how I want my body to feel and how I want my body to respond and move and all of those things. And so are there times where I make choices that are not ideal for my body? Yes, because I think we all at some point do that. But I'm conscious of what the consequences are, and I'm conscious of how I'm going to feel after. And I know that there could be consequences going in. Like, especially knowing kind of the dietary background, you're coming from. If you haven't eaten wheat for years and all of a sudden you decide to eat something that has wheat in it, you might wake up the next day. And I know I'll wake up with joint pain, and inflammation and things along those lines. And we make choices. And so what I like to talk to people about is like worth it moments. Like, I had a client who basically within like 3 days of starting working with me, and we've got this well-formulated keto diet together for her, ketogenic diet for her. She says, well, there's a birthday party at my mother's house this weekend and there's cake, and I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to handle the cake. And my immediate response was, cake is not going anywhere. Cake is not going away. It's not like the world has put a more, an end date to when there's not going to be cake available anywhere. And I was like, and is this a cake that like your mother is making by scratch? And, bringing, it's your grandmother's recipe that your mother's making is passing down to you? Or is this a supermarket sheet cake that they sell for $9? There's 700 of them piled up. Like, what is this? Tell me about this cake experience, why you're thinking that this is worth it. And she's like, well, no, it's just a supermarket cake. And I'm like, cake's not going anywhere. So do you need cake? Do you need cake or do you want cake? And she was like, well, it's just, that's what you do at a party. I'm like, well, is that what you do? I'm like, you have 200 pounds you want to lose. Is someone who has 200 pounds to lose, is just having random cake at a party something that they want to do, or something they need to do? And I said, so there's a difference. Like, because I remember one of the things that I talked about with my coach when we were approaching maintenance, and he can very much be for himself, like, this is the way I'm going to eat for the rest of my life. I don't deviate. This is how I'm going to eat. And I said to him, I'm like, one of the things that I wanted to do this year was go to Europe, which didn't happen. And I said, if I'm in Paris in front of the best Parisian bakery ever, and I smell fresh croissants coming out, I may have a croissant. And is that keto? No, it's not. But in front of a French bakery in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, when else am I going to be there? When else am I going to have that experience? So I think food can be about experiences sometimes. I think the difference is, for most of us, especially if you're dealing with someone who has food addiction issues or has a massive weight journey, or even someone who doesn't have a huge amount of weight to lose, but has struggled with weight issues, is we see food as the entertainment. We see food as the focal point. And it's like getting to that place of not just seeing food as entertainment, but seeing food as this fuel that you can enjoy. And it's okay to take away the guilt of understanding that if you are keto and you eat a really great steak, and have some roasted vegetables with it, and you enjoy it, you're not a bad person because you enjoyed that food. Like, there's no emotional value to judgment on whether you enjoy your food or not. And there are some people that love being in that strict place of, I eat ground turkey and rice. I eat ground turkey and rice, and that's what I eat, and that's what I eat. I think about that, and I don't know if I could handle, I would have to be locked in a room to be able to handle that. But it also doesn't mean that I know that there are certain foods that are not great for my body that probably quote unquote taste better because they're engineered by scientists to taste better. So for me, it comes back to this idea of we make choices, and do sometimes those choices fall in line with a dietary profile, a way of eating. Yeah, of course. And like I have keto in my, like I said, yeah, I'm not trying to just keep plugging it, but one of the things that I've seen a lot of my friends like in the keto community take keto out of their Instagram handles because they're like, I don't want to identify with the diet. I keep it in my profile not because I identify keto is my identity, but because I want the people that are looking for information to be able to find me, to be able to track me down and know that, this is someone who talks about this. This is someone who will be willing to have a conversation about what it means to, follow a ketogenic lifestyle. But that doesn't mean that every day, every moment falls in line with those things. And I think that's the place that people want to be at, and they don't want to put the work in to get to, that place of being able to make choices and not have those choices have bad consequences. Because I've made those choices and have had bad consequences. I've had those choices throw me completely off the rails. And I think it's all about that self-awareness of getting to that growth place with yourself where you now realize that you were the person in control of the food. And if you don't feel like you are, that's okay. Like, it's really okay to feel like you don't have that measure of control, because I think sometimes we get very much also into that dogma of, well, no one else lifted that fork to your face. No one shoved that donut into your mouth. Like, you did that to yourself. And to some extent that's true. And to some extent, there's other factors that are at play, whether it's emotions or, just carb cravings and addictions and things along those lines. Like, I think it's okay to kind of acknowledge that you're in a place where you feel powerless to some of those things, but you want to get to a different place. And knowing that working on that can be a goal is great, but it also is okay to just be where you are today and say, okay, so for today, I'm strict keto. That's where I need to be because that's where my goals are. And then tomorrow, will I be somewhere different, or 6 months from now, or a year from now, or 5 years from now? And then we could also, obviously, I'm sure we could also have a very long conversation about what we think is like the ideal nutritional program for anyone, most human beings to follow. But not everyone can, not everyone is going to be able to wrap their heads around to being able to do certain things. And I think as long as a person finds what works for them in a way that can actually be sustained, you're not seeing it as a temporary fix. I've had people reach out to me and say, I want to do keto for 30 days. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what, you want to do keto for 30 days. So you want to get into this place of identifying that certain ingredients make your body feel better and certain things make you feel better, but you only want to do it for 30 days. So clearly they're looking for like a shredding program. Like, that's what they're about, whether it's a wedding or something along those lines. So I've even had people like that. I've said, I don't think it would be great for us to work together, because I'm really more about helping someone find how they want to live their life. And I have clients that I am working with that they have said, we're a few months in and they're like, I don't know if I'm going to be, 100% ketogenic for the rest of my life. And I'm like, that's completely okay. I'm like, but let's be mindful about whatever you end up doing. Like, let's really think about not just saying I used this and I throw it away, but what are the lessons that you learned? What are the things that came out of that for you? Because I think that's the thing for me is like, really, I had to really dig in and think about what was I pulling from all these different points in my journey. What did I learn from losing all that weight and regaining that weight and losing that weight again? Like, what are the things that came out of that for me? Because when we don't try to learn those lessons, it's like either one, we're doomed to repeat our mistakes, or we just don't move forward. We end up staying stuck in the same place where we were at to begin with. And for most of us, we know that place we were in was not a great place to be. So why would we want to allow ourselves to stay there?
And we tend to play tricks on ourselves. We find all the loopholes right away, and then we double down on them, right? We find our way to still overeat the now highly caloric, fatty foods. Right. And I heard you talk about, especially looking at total carbs versus net carbs, considering all of the new products that are out that kind of like say this cookie only has 1 gram. When in fact, like, the numbers don't quite work like that, especially once they go inside your body. So maybe you could speak to that a little.
Yeah, and this is where I'll probably lose some people who won't be happy with me. You know, but I think there's a couple of reasons why I sit firmly in this camp of counting total carbs versus net carbs. Because one, I firmly believe, and people can challenge me if they want to, but I believe that like about 90 to 99% of the people out there that are choosing net carbs as their path are doing it because they want to allow foods that they know they probably shouldn't be eating.
Sure.
They want to fit in the regular use of treats and things that should, if we look at what the word treat means, it's like there's something special. Like, but when you're having cookies every day, even if they're keto cookies every day, is that really a treat, or is it you're building that in to be a part of your life? Right. And with the idea of net carb math, like I was actually talking with someone the other day who was even saying that, like, the person that invented this idea of net carbs, it had nothing to do with science. It had to do with labeling of food, right, and not wanting the food to appear to have as many carbs as it did. So they created this idea of net carbs, and then it became this prolific thing that spread now, many years later, dogmatically throughout, the health, fitness, weight loss space. And because the idea of net carbs is that you subtract fiber and sugar alcohols from the total grams of carbs.
If you just do the fiber, that's one thing, but the sugar alcohols, that's a whole different game.
Right. And that's the thing, is like, it starts to get so confusing.
Yeah.
Like, it starts, like, you have to get really complicated, because then it's like you start to look at, okay, there are certain fibers that we actually do digest some of the caloric load. And there are some sugar alcohols that affect us in different ways. And fiber and sugar alcohols, even if they're not affecting us calorically, may be causing blood sugar spikes. So you're dealing with a whole range of issues. So at the end of the day, counting total carbohydrates, there's no math involved.
Yeah.
There's no wicked science. There's none of that. And even if that means if someone gives themselves a higher number of total carbs to eat per day than they might if they were doing net carbs, that's completely okay too. At the end of the day, like, give yourself a higher number of total carbs. You're still going to have better control of what you're actually putting into your body. And I know there's going to be someone out there who says, well, I do net carbs and all I eat is green vegetables. Great. Like, that's really awesome. Like, I think that person is probably doing it right. Like, you are doing it right.
Yeah,
if you're subtracting your fiber so you can get yourself some more arugula, more power to you. Like, that's fantastic. Most people are doing it because they want the ketogenic ice cream. They want, and they want the ketogenic cookies. They want to use the baking mixes. And honestly, I eat those things. I'm not saying those things are terrible.
Right.
I'm not saying that they're things that don't have a place and a time, but it's this idea that we don't think about place and time with food. We just think about regularity. And I see way too many people kind of on that train of taking the foods that they had emotional issues with before and control issues with when they were heavier, and they just replicate them and then have those same issues again. They see those same exact problems, because at the end of the day, it's not even about the ingredients. It is about your relationship with those foods, and it's about you're keeping those demons alive. And I've had some great discussions. I have some friends, that have lost. I have a lot of, like, one of the things you talked about, my podcast, the Fat Guy Forum. So I have many friends that have lost hundreds of pounds, many guys that have done it. And a lot of them have done it, following the eating way that I have, a ketogenic life. And I have a good friend Miles, who said the thing for him is when he eats like a ketogenic ice cream or a ketogenic cookie, it doesn't really scratch the itch. So when you think you want a cookie, when he thinks he wants a cookie, he has this ketogenic cookie, and it's like having like a cookie played by another role on television. It's like people love to make jokes about like LaCroix water, like LaCroix water, lemon LaCroix tastes like LaCroix, whatever, how it's pronounced. It tastes like a car full of sparkling water drove by a lemon on the side of the road. Right. Like that's what those flavors taste like. And I sometimes think some of these keto products, like, they give you a hint of that sense memory of what that food is like. So everyone kind of jumps at it and it's like, this is amazing. And some of them actually replicate the taste amazingly well. And I don't know where their science and wizardry comes from. Like, I don't know what kind of magic they do. But for the most part, I think a lot of them create just this continued, almost like not quite scratching that itch in the middle of your back. So all you want to do is keep scratching that itch.
Yeah.
And so then eventually, you're eating more and more of these things that you think are good for you because they have keto on the label. Whereas really, if you had taken a measured helping of actual, real, locally made, great ice cream and had that, you probably would have been much more satiated and satisfied with that experience than you would have eating a pint of, I hate to throw product names out there, but Halo Top ice cream.
Yeah.
Like, and then there's another one that is more like dishwater. I can get cruel sometimes, but it's just this idea that, like, and then you can determine if that experience was worth it. Because I think that's the other thing that I ask people. Like, I'll have a client that says, I really want to try this, whether it's a new company has a keto peanut butter cup or something along those lines. They're like, and it's 5 grams of total carbs. I really want to have one of these. I'm like, okay, you're going to have that. But I want to have a conversation after you have that about what it was like. What was that experience really like? Because in their memory, they're thinking about a fresh Reese's peanut butter cup with the soft peanut butter that breaks apart and kind of the chocolate starts to melt immediately in your hands. And then you have the ketogenic peanut butter cup, which is a bit chalkier, and the peanut butter really isn't that creamy. And it's kind of got a hint of peanut flavor, but there's something else going on in there. And the chocolate has a little bit of a weird aftertaste depending on the sweetener used. And then I'm like, so was this the magical peanut butter cup experience that you had built up in your head? And they're like, no, it wasn't worth it. It was a waste of like 250 calories. Yeah. And I'm like, what could you have had instead that probably, the same number of carbs, the same number of calories, what could you have had instead that probably would have been more satisfying? Right. And that it's a mind game. It really is. And I think it's okay. Like, I think it's okay sometimes to take those fails, though. Like, if you're getting so obsessed that you think this is going to be this perfect experience for you, it's almost better to go through that and come out of it on the other side and say that wasn't worth it. Yeah. Because then you're learning that it wasn't worth it, instead of always holding it up as this like sacred cow that you can go to. And like, it's someday I'm going to find, like, I know honestly, probably for, a solid year and a half, I was chasing perfect keto ice creams. I was like, someone's going to nail this. Someone is going to nail texture and taste, and it's going to be just like, and they're going to do it. I have faith that someone out there is going to do it. And I'll come down. Like, maybe this will lose me some votes if I'm ever in an election. I don't think there is a ketogenic ice cream out there that tastes like regular ice cream. Yeah. Like, that has that same, I think there are some now that use sweeteners. There's a lot on the allulose train they're replicating texture a little bit better, but they're not replicating flavor. And then there are some that hit flavor, but it's like eating a mouthful of chalk. Yeah. And, at some levels, I'm taking the hit trying some of these things for people. But then I start to think about, why am I chasing this? Like, what is this part of me that is chasing this perfect ice cream? Right. It's because I want that ice cream that I ate before, So then it's like I have to be conscious of, like, I'm just replicating old experiences with these foods. And I have to be okay. Like, this will summarize it for you, because I have so many people many times, I think this is the cliche question when someone says they follow a keto lifestyle. Someone says, so you're never going to eat cake again? Right. You're never going to have cake again in your life? Go back to cake. Cake will always be there. And I say, I will probably at some point in my life eat cake. That will probably happen. But I have to wake up every day and know that I can survive that day without cake. Yeah. So I could live my life without cake. And if I can live my life without ice cream and without Reese's peanut butter cups and without all of those things, and know that I can lead a healthy, thriving life doing that, it's a much better mindset. So when I do decide that I'm going to have one of those things, it's not a life-saving moment. It's not something that's like this life-changing moment with food. It's me making a decision. I very infamously, I guess, on my account at times have posted about, there's a cookie for sale at Disneyland, which, is Disneyland is not open right now. I'm sorry. I don't mean to get too timely on you, but, Disneyland is not open right now. And it's destroying me that I'm on the West Coast and Disneyland's not open. But they sell this cookie called the Matterhorn macaroon, and it looks like a mountain. It's a coconut shortbread hybrid cookie that looks like a mountain. And the only place they sell it on the planet is at one bakery, the Disneyland, the Mary Poppins Bakery in Disneyland. It's the only place they sell this cookie. So when I go to Disneyland, I tell myself I'm going to let myself have this cookie, because this is probably the only cookie on the planet that I would say I might get into a fight with someone over. But I set up the rules for myself. I'm going to sit. Last time I had one, I sat with my sister and we watched the fireworks in front of the Disneyland castle, and we had our macaroons. And the rest of, that was also the trip I had introduced the rest of my family to the Matterhorn macaroons. Yeah. And they loved them and bought a whole bag of them to take back to the hotel. And I was like, well, my rules are in the park. I can have one. But for me, that experience of sitting with my sister on a bench in front of a castle, watching fireworks, having that cookie was worth it. Yeah. If I could have that cookie every day, it wouldn't be a worth it experience. It wouldn't be something that was actually this important. It wouldn't be a memorable moment. It would just start to become something that I could grab. Like, that's this idea that all these things being available at stores all the time and being readily available. And yes, I think access is great, especially with some of the keto products. But I think you do have to at some point ask yourself, am I replacing another experience for the sake of replacing the experience, or do I really need this as a food? And don't get me wrong, I think there are probably a lot of people that have been helped by products like this to help make a transition for themselves. But I honestly, at the end of the day, also, I think they might have made a better transition if they hadn't had those products in the way. I think they probably dealt with some more lingering cravings that they weren't even thinking about, like keeping some of those fires going. So while they would sit down today and say, it was great for me to have Halo Top around while I was transitioning to keto, I would end up saying, well, if you hadn't had that around, might the transition even have been smoother for you? So it's just this idea of be mindful in the choices that you're making. And sometimes it doesn't always mean that those choices are going to be things that are 100% ideal, but no person lives a 100% ideal life. And if you do, you're probably missing out on some experiences. And I'm not just talking about food, I'm talking about life in general, because you're in such a strict dogmatic place.
Yeah, and it's so easy to get carried away with some of these like products that totally line up with your dietary plan or whatever, and they slap the label on it, so it's like eating a whole pint of Halo Top. It's only 300 or 400 calories when it should be 1,000, and thank goodness that I can just eat as much of this as I want. And also I think that happens because, like you said, it doesn't provide the whole experience of like the actual ice cream where you have a few bites, you have the whole experience. After a while, you're over it. But a lot of these products that are substitutes, they don't kick in, you know? And so it just kind of like gives you that little tickle again. Makes it hard to actually kick these foods out for good. And also, I think another thing worth bringing up, especially with food addiction and trying to recreate your favorite foods, is one of the reasons like I love pies and I love cakes and I love cookies is because when we got together with all my cousins and all like my aunts and uncles and the whole family and everyone kicked back and was having a great time, we had all those things. And so I think a lot of that craving is more emotional than we realize, when it's like we want that whole experience. And so if we have a substitute of the food that like represents that experience, it's pretty empty.
Oh yeah. Oh, and that's, but we think it won't be.
Right.
You know, we think that by recreating just the food, we recreate the experience. And that's where people get tripped up. And that's where the I think also that idea of, you know, food addiction is more than just the physical side of it. You know, it's this emotional thing. Like you're a lot of times you're eating because of, you know, some driving emotional issue. And like, I honestly think that anyone who gets, you know, as heavy as I was, probably has some trauma they need to process, you know, that drives some of those food issues. And I'm not saying that everyone does. I've had, you know, my podcast is always about guys of all varying sizes that are facing weight loss, you know, journeys. And some of them are at the beginning, some of them are at the end. And I've talked to people that were 500-600 pounds and never once felt that they were addicted to food. It was just that they had poor eating habits and it just became easy. And that was what was easy for them. And it was easy, you know, and did they eat a lot of food? Of course, you know, like, of course, you know, the human body is not meant to be over 500 pounds. It will not stay there unless you're putting enough food into it to keep it there. But they weren't the person that was, I turned to this food because I felt sad. I turned to this because I was happy. I celebrated with this. To them, it was, this is what my family put in front of me. This is what we ate. So I just, when I was an adult and I could buy more of it, I bought more of it. You know, why wouldn't I buy it? You know, like, so it's amazing. Like I talk a lot on the podcast about how we all can end up in the same, a lot of people can end up in the same place with their weight, but the path we take to get there, you know, that brings us to those quote unquote heights, can be very different. And so that's why your reactions and your solutions, like I know people that thrive making ketogenic desserts every day, you know, like they do it every day and they thrive and they're doing great. And for them, it's never a challenge because they never once felt that fire inside of you that ignites when you eat something sweet. You know, they never had that real issue. Like they never had that emotional issue where you were someone like I've talked before, you know, in interviews I've done and on my page and in other people I've interviewed, like, you know, for me, I just remember laughing because there was someone on another podcast that I listened to. He said, you know, yeah, I was completely out of control. You know, I remember one day I spent $15 at Taco Bell. And the host laughed, and I laughed listening to it because I was like, if you didn't spend more than $30 or $40 at a fast food place, were you even really there?
Oh
like,
my gosh.
It's levels. It's, you know, there's levels to challenges. And I've even, you know, I was interviewing a friend who was 600 pounds, you know, and now has lost over 200 pounds. And when we were talking, one of the things he brought up was just, you know, he's got a brother that's losing like 40 pounds and just the issues they deal with being different. And I talked about, you know, having to lose 200 to 300 pounds is different than having to lose 20 to 30 pounds.
For sure.
And I got some very angry messages from people saying, you're invalidating my weight loss journey because you're telling me that my journey isn't the same as yours. And I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that your challenges are invalid. I'm not saying that the mountains you had to climb for yourself didn't seem the same exact as the ones that I had to do for me.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the amount of time it takes to lose 20 pounds is going to be very different than the time it takes to lose 200 pounds.
Yeah.
And most likely there's a lot of other challenges, a lot of other health issues at play, a lot of really, when someone can't physically walk around the block, how do they get into a gym, when they're first starting their weight loss journey? Like when someone, when I first started, even this round, quote unquote, of weight loss, in 2017, I love saying quote unquote, I don't know why I do that. One of my little ticks. But my physical activity was I would walk from my apartment on the second floor of my building to the front steps, and I would sit. And there was a telephone pole basically one short block away. And it would probably be about 2 to 3 minutes of walking to get to the telephone pole and 2 to 3 minutes to get back. And that's what I did. Every day I walked for 5 minutes because that was all I could do. Doing that, I would be exhausted and sit on my steps for another 10, 15 minutes after, and then walk up to my apartment and sit down again. That's different than someone who can immediately the first day of their journey walk into a gym and do an exercise class or jump onto a treadmill for an hour.
Yes.
There's just different levels and different challenges. And that was really one of the reasons that I started the podcast, the Fat Guy Forum, because I felt like there were a lot of people in the health and fitness sphere doing podcasts that, yes, they may have done that 20 to 30 pound weight loss, or they may have been like an off-season bodybuilder who came back, or a fitness trainer who fell off for a month.
Yeah.
But there weren't a lot of people talking to men that actually were living lives dealing with their weight, for decades, and then were making changes, and some of them dealing with hundreds of pounds to lose. And also I saw that there were a lot of podcasts that were focused specifically on women and the specific issues they face. And I think while there's a lot of commonality between the issues that men and women face on a weight loss journey, and I work in my coaching, I work with men and women, like most of my clients are women. I think sometimes there's a difference in the stories and the experiences of what it means, to be, especially even just to sit down and talk about what it means to be significantly overweight in high school. You're going to sit down and talk to a woman. You're going to hear a lot about the oppression they're facing and those challenges, and probably more intense bullying, where a lot of the men I've talked to, I was very much bullied in school. I was bullied for most of my life when I was in schools. And a lot of the guys I talked to, I immediately was expecting to have them have that same exact experience, and they were going to have this commonality. And I think the first 5 or 6 guys I talked to that were my size when they were at their biggest, they were like, no, I was really popular in school. I played football. I did this. I did that. I never had an issue with my weight with my friends or with people.
Yeah.
And it's just this idea that these experiences can be very different. But then they talk about getting into the workplace and that being a very different place for them. And so I just wanted to give voice to that. And one of the things, that just comes out of that is that there is this variety of experience, and it's great for me. My podcast is not exclusively keto. Some people think that it is, but it's not. I've talked to guys that have lost their weight on Weight Watchers or have had surgery, and I've talked to guys that have had surgery and thrived, and I've talked to guys that have had surgery and failed,
right,
and then ended up turning to something else and having to, and it's great to dive deep with those, have those guys that are willing to open up and tell me, I failed, at my weight loss surgery, and I saw my weight start to go back up again, and I had no idea how to handle my life, and this is what I went through, and this is what I'm doing now, and it's powerful to hear them opening up and sharing those experiences. And for me, it kind of just reinforces everything. In some ways I started it to help me, to keep me kind of focused on the goals that are important for me. But it also, I learn something from every person I talk to, and I take something away and something I haven't thought about. And whether that's an actual food idea or a fitness idea, or even just kind of a mindset, challenge piece, there's just so much. There's such a wealth of experience that everyone is going through with these issues that I just appreciate being able to kind of bring some of that forward.
Yeah, and especially stories that are told less, because oftentimes what you find in the fitness community is a bunch of fitness bunnies preaching to the choir, right? And that can be and I'm kind of a little bit of a hybrid, but probably, especially now, more on that side. And I absolutely 110% agree with you that there's such a wealth of experience and so much perspective that's offered from me. I identify when you said, and I never quite thought about it this way, but some people, it seems like they've been kind of lifelong athletes and they just had a bad off season, gained 30 pounds, lost some muscle, whatever. And that's actually a quite accurate way of me seeing my experience, maybe multiple times and maybe not just a long off season or whatever, but I think a lot of people can identify with that, and that it has its own struggles, but it's kind of its own thing. So fundamentally different though from not being able to use movement, especially at the beginning when you want to get momentum, when you want to start building muscle. Like, what a massive advantage it is to be an ex-athlete who already knows their way around the gym. So different from someone who is, like hundreds of pounds overweight and doesn't have that experience and doesn't kind of have that muscle memory too. And it's really important to recognize that when the fitness bunnies talk to each other about the weight just coming right off, that's not everyone's experience. That's not how it works for everybody.
And I mean, and it's, when you look at these people and I look at my own story, I look at my own journey, like what life was like for me when I was heavier, like the idea that I used to spend a lot of time worrying about if seats could hold me and would I be able to fit into a bathroom. I remember going to a friend's wedding and I checked into the hotel and I went to the room, and the bathroom, the toilet stall was in this small alcove, basically far at the back of it. And I couldn't fit into the small alcove. So I had to go to the front desk of the hotel and say, I don't fit in the bathroom of this room. Is there another room available? And they weren't going to have another room available for like another 12 hours. So basically, like, I had that room and I could use the bathroom in the lobby, until they could move me to another room. Like, those are things that you think about. Like, can you, like, I used to often think about, like, will I be able to park close enough somewhere so that I could get into the space if I'm going to join friends or family at an event? Like, and if I can't, what is the excuse I'm going to use this time? Because I've used that one before and I've used that one before and I got to come up with something new. And just that mental headspace being freed up, is kind of incredible now, being able to say, I can say yes to anything and go anywhere and do anything. And being someone that could always say yes to everything, trying to tell someone who has never had that experience, like, that you're going to get there and it's going to be possible. I think sometimes it's hard for them to hear it, and accept that change is actually really possible for them. And that's why I want to bring the stories of the guys that were in that place, the guys that were worried that they were headed towards being on, TLC's My 600-Pound Life if they didn't make changes.
Yeah.
And then they did make changes. And I've had guys on who literally are 5 pounds into a weight loss journey and guys that are 400 pounds into a weight loss journey. And every moment of that is valuable. Like, every moment there's different insight. And because I remember one of my friends, Josh, when I had him on, he was very much like, I want to come on, but I don't feel like I've done enough yet. And I said, Josh, I think the fact that you are just getting started is something that people need to hear, because there's a lot of people out there listening that are afraid to get started or don't know how to get started. So hearing from someone who literally this is their first week working out and their first week changing how they're eating was powerful, because he was able to say, this is what I'm struggling with right now, instead of saying, I remember struggling with that 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And, then I talked to guys that were 500 pounds and now are getting ready to step on bodybuilding stages. Like, everyone has this amazing kind of like piece that's unique to them. And, I bring up the bodybuilding stage thing because that's the other thing I think is different. Like, most of the, most people out there are not trying to lose weight or improve their health to get on a fitness stage, to run a marathon, to be in a physique show. And there are people that are, and that's fantastic, and I think that, having goals is amazing. But for the most part, it's people are trying to actually live accessible lives. Like, that's something I've talked with a lot of people lately. Like, this idea that they want to make changes so that they can access life in a better way, that they can actually take opportunities and they cannot have to say no to everything. And I think when you kind of come into that place of realizing that just the gratitude they have at being able to, one of my clients yesterday messaged me because the jeans she was wearing fell down when she was at an appointment. And she's like, I have a pair of jeans that don't fit anymore. She's like, and they're not small, it's great. Like, this is, it's not like, I'm not getting into like a size 4 jean and standing on a stage. But to her, that was like a fantastic experience. Like, we all have these different measures and markers along the way. And I just love being able to talk to those people that are, I don't want to use the word regular, but it's just this idea that they're not trying to get into an industry.
Yes.
They're not changing their physiques to which, if you are, like, I look at some of these people, like, I even have a friend who was on the show who was 450 pounds, and you look at him now and there's no way you would even know that without seeing his before pictures. Yeah. Like, he is just diesel. He is getting ready to get on a bodybuilding stage next year. Wow. And he will probably kick some butt. But that's great that that's what he wants to do. But then I also talk to, I have another friend who he just really wants to be able to fit into his wife's car. Like, like, it's just this completely, it can be about different things for all of us, like, at the end of the day, but not losing sight of what that actually means, for each of us as an individual person, I think is really what's important. Like, knowing that it's okay for your goals to not look like someone else's, I guess was the long story, the short story of that long-winded rant. Like, just know that it's okay that if your goal is to be able to work out 4 times a week and not about being able to run 10 miles, like that's fine. Or even it's just to be able to run, like you've never been able to run before and you want to be able to just feel what it is like to run a couple blocks when you're going on a walk. Like it's okay to have goals that are different than another person's, as long as it's something that's driving you and it's something that, really is giving you something to strive for.
Yeah. Well, we only have a couple minutes left, but I want to make sure that you tell the quick story about when you got pneumonia and you were told essentially that you would have died if you hadn't already prioritized your health before that.
This is a little bit wild. So one of the things I mentioned was that I was kind of doctor phobic for decades, like because when you're that big, you know what you're going to hear from doctors. I knew that I had all of the symptoms of diabetes when I was heavier, the urinating, the foot pain, everything you could think of, sweats after eating, all of that. So I avoided doctors like the plague. And in 2017, after being about 100 or so pounds into my weight loss journey already, I got pneumonia. I got a cold that wouldn't go away. It went away. It came back. And I was basically lying in my apartment one night and said, if I don't go to a doctor, I'm probably going to die. Like I can barely breathe right now. I cannot walk. So I called my dad and I'm like, I need to go to a doctor. And so here I am in my 40s. I had no idea how to find a doctor because I literally, as an adult, never found a doctor. I had never done that. So I was like, I don't even know what to do. And luckily I knew he had a tennis buddy that was a general practitioner. He's like, let me call him, see if he can see you in the morning. My dad misinterpreted some of the symptoms I said and thought I had flu symptoms. So told the guy that I had the flu. We went to the doctor's office and I had to stop 5 times walking into the doctor's office to catch my breath because that's how bad my breathing was at that point. And so there I am sitting on the examination table, probably pale as a ghost. And he walked in and got this horrific look on his face, immediately put a pulse ox meter on my hand and said, you need to go to a hospital right now. He goes, I should call an ambulance, but I'll let your dad drive you as long as you say you're going without. He goes, don't stop at home to get anything. You need to go to a hospital right now.
Wow.
The other serendipity that happened was the person working at the ER was actually a gym buddy of my dad's and kind of bumped me up the list to get me seen. They rolled me into the back and threw me on a table and basically ripped my shirt off and threw electrodes onto me to make sure I wasn't having a heart attack, all of these things. And at that point inside of my head, that I was facing my greatest fear ever, which was medical diagnosis. Like I was in this incredible panic place, but I kind of was like, if you don't let them do their work, you're going to die. So just let them do what they need to do. Just let them do what so they put oxygen on me. Probably an hour or two later when I was sitting in the ER, a doctor came in and I don't know if you know what a lung x-ray should look like, but x-ray of the lung should be black. It should just almost be clear. And he brought it in and it looked like 2 giant white clouds with thin black lines at the top. And he said, if you had waited another hour or two, you probably would have died. Your oxygen level was low enough that at this point, we don't know if you've damaged anything. We really don't know. They had the oxygen on me at the highest level possible. They had already given me like 3 or 4 injections. And they're like, we need to admit you immediately, or something. You still at this point could die. So there I was admitted to the hospital a few weeks before Christmas in 2017. My family had this big trip to California planned. That didn't happen. I was in the hospital for 17 days, basically bedridden in the hospital for 17 days. And so a couple interesting things happened. One, I stayed keto in the hospital. That was the challenge.
Uphill battle, right?
Yeah. The very first night, the nutrition people came to me and they were like, what kind of food do you want, when we're setting up your food for tomorrow? And I said, well, I eat keto, eat low carb. And they're like, okay, we'll give you the low carb diabetic meal. I'm like, that sounds great. This will be awesome. And I got the diabetic meal the next morning and it had a blueberry muffin, oatmeal with a packet of brown sugar, an orange juice, and a piece of fruit.
Wow.
And then there were some powdered eggs. And I said to the person, this is the low carb meal. And he said, well, yes, it's less carbohydrates than the regular meal that people would be getting. And I'm like, what are the people who are not on this diet getting, oh my goodness, like this is insane. So I was like, I'm going to need to talk to someone. I need a supervisor, like I had my Karen moment and said, I need a supervisor. And the same person from dietary came back down and I was like, I don't eat. And so I had to be like, I don't eat bread. I don't eat rice. I don't eat pot. Like I had to lay it out. I'm like, I eat meat and vegetables. And I'm going to need you to give me some extra butter pack. And I actually started hoarding butter packets in the bedstand by my bed because I was like, I didn't know when there would be more.
Right.
And
I know
luckily
that
I had a lot of friends. Yeah, I had a lot of friends and family around who would bring food in for me, like local restaurant, bringing in a steak or fajitas or things along those lines, things that were a little better. But it was an experience that was wild and insane. And It took them a long time to handle the pneumonia because they could kill the infection, but the damage done to my lungs, they said that my lungs had developed a condition known as being hepatic tissue, which is your lungs should be like cotton, but my lungs actually had the texture of the liver, like that heavy, dense tissue, because it was just swollen and dealing with that amount of infection. So they had to put me on steroids. They told me the steroids might cause hallucinations, and I actually thought that aliens were coming to get me for 2 nights. So every time the nurse would put the blanket over me at night when I should be sleeping, I would throw it off and say the aliens were coming and I needed to be ready.
Good God.
That was a good time. So, and then like to talk about like health and impact on health. A couple things happened when I was in the hospital that I learned. Like, one, I finally had my A1C and all of that checked, and I was perfect. Things were great. Which was, fantastic to hear, like to not even be pre-diabetic. But they actually woke me up one morning at 6 a.m. and said, the doctor thinks you're having a heart attack right now. We need to take you for an echocardiogram. And I was like, they think I'm having a heart attack right now? And the nurse is like, yes, they think you're having a heart attack right now. And I'm like, shouldn't they be doing something to me? Like, okay. So they literally wheeled me down, did an echocardiogram. I'm like, got the sweats, my heart's racing, all of this. The technician at the end is like, are you okay? And I'm like, well, am I okay? And she's like, what do you mean? I go, well, the nurse told me that I was having a heart attack. And she goes, oh, no, the doctor thinks you had a heart attack at some point in your past and just wanted to have a test done. I'm like, okay,
Oh my God.
this is a little bit different than you're having one right now. That was an experience. But then and I'm like, well, how does everything look? And she's like, she goes, from my end, she goes, everything looks good. You're okay right now, all of that. But then I did have one of the doctors come up eventually and talk to me and tell me that at some point in my past, without knowing it, I had a heart attack and I didn't know it. And the funny thing was, he said, so, to try to pinpoint when this might have happened, did you ever have a night where you went to bed uncomfortable? And I said, doctor, I was over 500 pounds. Every night I went to bed, I was uncomfortable. Like every night I felt my heart race. Every night I had the sweats. Like this was every night. Yeah. Like there's no way to pinpoint it. But that was like a lesson for me. And then I had to see a cardiologist for 6 months after I was out of the hospital. But like I said, I was in the hospital for 17 days and I was bedridden for a month and a half after that, staying at my parents' house because I couldn't get up the stairs to my apartment. It was very much, and I couldn't go back to the gym until the cardiologist cleared me. There was all of this. Like when I left the hospital, it was New Year's Eve that we actually left the hospital. And I had oxygen and I was on oxygen for a month, so I had this tank that I would wheel around. It was around the time of one of the new Star Wars movies came out, and it actually come out right before Christmas. I'm a big Star Wars nerd, and my sister and I went to see it after, and she literally had to drop me off at the front of the theater, and I wheeled in the oxygen. Like it was my very first outing, really, like, kind of like heading out. Like, so it was just incredible for me to think that here I was doing all this work on trying to save my health, change, and then this happens, something that's completely out of my control. But the interesting is like you intimated in asking the question, like I had many doctors say that if you hadn't done something, you wouldn't have survived this. Like if you weren't working on your health, if you hadn't been working on your cardiovascular health, if you weren't working out, if you hadn't changed what you were eating, like if your blood sugar was still out of control, you would not have survived this. And so for me, it was almost like that experience cemented what I was doing, like in a way that was just different than deciding that I wanted to live. It cemented it in a way that I was like actually it gave me a tangible, answer to, yes, you're doing the right thing. Yes, you're doing something great. I also had a lot of fun proselytizing about keto to people in the hospital.
Yeah, right. Coaching the nurses, weren't you?
Yeah, all the different nurses would come and be like, I heard you're the keto guy. I heard you're the keto guy. How do I get started? How do I do it? What do you eat? What is this like? What are you doing? And then even one of the things that came out of this for me was I finally had a regular physician, just a regular general doctor. And the first time I went to meet with him, it went great. And we talked about that I was low carb. And he was he's like, when it was time to talk about blood work, he's like, we'll have to have you come back when you're fasted and do blood work. And I'm like, well, I'm fasted already. I'm like, I haven't eaten anything since 5 o'clock yesterday. And he immediately gets this glint in his eye. And he said, do you intermittent fast? And I'm like, well, yes, I do. He's like, I love intermittent fasting. I recommend it for all of my all of my patients, blah, 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 And so then we talked a little bit more about that kind of thing. And then when he eventually, I had disclosed to him that I ate a ketogenic diet. And so at my follow-up a year later, he came in and he looked like a kid who had like a secret to tell his parents. Like he was like rocking and like excited. And I was like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, I just want you to know that I went keto and I've lost 25 pounds in a month. And this is amazing. And this is great. And, and the funny thing was, the great thing is that he's educating himself. So he started to talk to me about, there's another doctor in his practice who very much basically does in-service training for the other doctors to talk about cholesterol and how cholesterol should properly be interpreted and how it's been interpreted wrong.
Right.
And basically lectures them on not prescribing statins and like all of this kind of like cutting edge, kind of like medical like activity, like, kind of approaching things properly, like, and having this great learned perspective. So when it was time for my blood work, he's like, no, we're not just going to run a regular cholesterol test. We're going to run particle density. And we're, if this is what it says, and you've been keto for a long time, so this number might be up and this number might be down and this might be here. But if you're here, you're okay. And we're also going to run, we had run a testosterone test on me before. And he's like, we're going to do the full panel this time. We're going to see what your free testosterone is versus this and that. And you could tell over the past year, he had done a lot of research, and so it's just great to see a doctor that's actually kind of actively, caring about what things mean and that sort of thing, and kind of help me change my perspective on working with doctors in general. And like, but it was that whole experience that just, all, so many different, serendipity moments, like of, what would have happened if it had been 6 months earlier, what would have happened, if I had given up, like what would have happened, all of those things, like kind of bringing me to where I am. And just knowing that, like, it's that I had a heart attack at some point, like, and didn't know it. Like, it's like, okay, there's like a badge you wear for the rest of your life, like that's there. And luckily for me, there was no physical damage to my heart, but there was electrochemical issues, that they could read and tell were there. But it was just this like very intense experience that taught me about controlling what I can control and letting go of the things that I can't control. Because, I didn't deal well. I never dealt well with blood in my life. They were taking blood from me 3 times a day, different arms, poking me. And like, I looked like I was like beaten up with the amount of bruising that I had from the amount of blood they were taking, and the IVs and all of that, like when they were pumping fluid into me. I also developed a reputation in the hospital for having this enormous bladder, apparently. That's a little bit of TMI for your audience. It actually became a thing where nurses would come in and be like, so you're the guy with the giant bladder. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, the amount that you put out because they had pumped me full of fluid, like to get my body hydrated again, because I was dehydrated, for a few weeks probably before I went in the hospital. And so that fluid has to come out of your body eventually. And apparently I would let it go in large amounts that they couldn't measure at first. They had to get different. Again, TMI, but they measure your urine output when you're in the hospital, especially when you're dealing with those kind of issues, when they've been giving you fluid. And they use these things they call hats that they pop into the urinal so you can urinate into it. And I was filling up more than one of those at a time. And they're like, we've never seen someone do this before. This is amazing. So I'm like, okay, so now I'm known as the keto guy and the guy with the bladder of steel in the hospital. This is like, I don't know if I can ever turn this into a career, but at some point, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
I really
much better
don't know.
than the alternative of...
Right, I know, right? So, having one the size of a pea. But, like it just was this, again, like it was this experience for me that, opened my eyes to a lot of the things that, that I was doing was right, and that I was on the right path, and that, working towards bettering my health was never going to be a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, Gormy, so fun to talk to you and catch up with you, man. What's the best place to find you?
Sure. So the best place to find me is probably on Instagram. They can catch me at Gormy_goes_keto. I'm very active on there, respond to messages, all of that. You can also find me on Twitter at Gormy goes keto, no underscores. You may know yourself. I think that's how we connected, was Twitter.
Yeah, I think it was.
Twitter can be a little bit of a sketchier place, I think, than Instagram. Yeah, like you can get some. I feel like every time I post anything on Twitter, I get attacked by vegans, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, me too.
But you can also, on whatever podcast platform you use, including now, Amazon Podcasts has just popped up. That's awesome. You can say, Alexa, play the Fat Guy Forum, and Fat Guy Forum plays. But you can find my podcast, The Fat Guy Forum, on Apple, Spotify, Alexa, all of those places.
Awesome.
And if you're interested in working with me as coaching, go to theketoroad.com. Like, that's one of those things, where I've always got, a door open if there's anyone, even if it's not something you're interested in, but you just want to talk more about what you're dealing with. Like, I love to talk to people about this stuff.
Very cool. Gormy, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Abel. It is I will say it's wild, for us to be able to talk. I can, I have to fanboy for a moment, with the wild diet and, having seen you on, because I also I've very much been connected over the years with Kurt from the show that you did on ABC, and like he's such a great guy,
awesome dude.
So like just being the chance to talk to you was just really great. I think you do some really great things for people, and like just it's just this idea of like all of us just trying to get people to think about what they're putting in their mouths and how that's can really be powerful, can have a powerful effect on your body in the end.
Absolutely. And I'm so inspired by people like you, like over the years connecting a little bit and through Kurt and then like actually. And so keep in touch, man. This is why I do this, because it's a uphill battle, as we all know. So we have to really be a community and get each other's backs. And so keep on doing your work. We need it more than ever.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
Hey folks, this is Abel James, New York Times best-selling author and creator of The Fat Burning Man Show. I've got a quick video here today about Future Greens from our family company, Wild Superfoods. So what is Future Greens? Well, it's a combination of shelf-stable fruits and veg that will keep you going on the road, when you're camping, or through the worst of the zombie apocalypses. We hear that kids love this. We have some kids in the family, lots of nieces and nephews, and we've taste tested this all over the country. And old and young alike, everyone in between, they seem to appreciate the flavor as well as the nutrients that you get. But one thing I think is really important at Wild Superfoods, my wife and I have been testing hundreds, maybe even thousands of powders and supplements and botanicals and nutraceuticals and various things over the years. And if they're powders, we believe that they should taste good. That if they taste like fish tank or they taste disgusting, or if you get fish burps from, fish oil supplements, you're not going to keep taking it. I know I won't. So we do our very best to make sure it tastes good, and Future Greens tastes good, whether it's just water or you're adding it to your favorite smoothie. But anyway, you mix this powder in with water, juice, or a smoothie. And what you're getting is a combination of over 15 different ingredients: organic spirulina, organic barley grass juice, organic wheatgrass juice, organic chlorella, organic nettle leaves, organic spinach, organic carrot, organic beet, organic tomato, organic kale, organic parsley, organic kale sprout, organic cauliflower sprout, organic broccoli sprout. And then for the fruits, organic apple, organic raspberry, organic cranberry, organic blueberry, camu berry extract, and then you get an ORAC proprietary blend as well of grape seed extract, grape skin extract, and a prebiotic and enzyme blend with organic burdock root and different enzymes as well. So all of this, once again, with 1 gram of sugar, and it's sweetened as well with a bit of organic stevia. So you get the good flavor without sacrificing, like falling on the sword and having a bunch of sugar at the same time, because God knows you can go crazy with smoothies. So this is a way to make sure that you get your nutrients in. Your smoothie or your drink is kind of getting a source of whole food multivitamins, you can think of it that way, and it's going to improve the flavor of most things that you mix it with. Now, I wouldn't recommend mixing it with anything dairy related, like you don't want to be mixing it with heavy cream. It's these are greens, remember, so greens and fruits. So anyways, if you're interested in Future Greens, this is one of our very favorites. We've taken it all over the world with us, and we hope you like it too. You can test it yourself and see how you like it over at wildsuperfoods.com. Once again, Future Greens over at wildsuperfoods.com. This is Abel James signing off. We'll be in touch. Hey, it's Abel one last time, and I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode of Fat Burning Man. Before you go, please smash that like button, hit subscribe, or even leave us a quick review. It helps so much more than you even realize. And if you can think of someone else who you care about, friend, family member, anyone else who might appreciate this free show, then please take a quick second just to share it with them. Word of mouth is really the way that we've grown this show over the years. We have more than, at this point, 4 awards in independent media, 50 million downloads. We couldn't do any of this without you, so we really appreciate it. If you'd like to get in touch with me, then please follow me under Abel James or Fat Burning Man on your social media platform of choice, and I'll do my best to get right back to you. Now, if you want to keep this show coming to you, you can do something really quickly here. My wife Allison and I, along with a very small team, depend on listeners like you to make this show happen week after week. To join our next challenge coaching group or get in touch with me one-on-one, visit fatburningman.com. We also make group coaching free with your subscribe and save orders from our family company, Wild Superfoods, which you can find at wildsuperfoods.com. And if you'd like, you can throw a few bucks into the tip jar as a one-time donation or become a contributing member of our group on Patreon. Just look up Abel James on Patreon, and you can join in the fun for as little as a few bucks and get my international best-selling book and audiobook as a special thanks. You can also find that page at fatburningman.com/tipjar. Now, a quick disclaimer for all those legal eagles out there. The Fat Burning Man Show provides general information and discussions about health and related subjects. The information provided in this show or in any related materials are not intended and should not be construed as medical advice, nor is the information a substitute for professional medical expertise, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions and views expressed on this show have no relation to those of any academic, hospital, health practice, or other institution, including corporate overlords. We don't have any of those. If you or any other person has a medical concern, I wholeheartedly encourage you to consult with your healthcare provider. Whew, okay. Don't forget to join our newsletter over at fatburningman.com. When you sign up for our email, I'll even send you a wild quick start guide along with a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes, even Allison's famous chocolate cookies, as a special thanks for signing up. This is Abel James signing off. Thank you so much for listening and have a great week.